Welcome to Linda's Corner. My name is Linda Bjork, and today we're going to be talking about loving life after loss. I'm delighted to welcome special guest Marie Alessi. Marie is a mother of two boys, a best-selling author, influencer, and speaker. She is also the founder of a global movement to help people love their life again after experiencing loss. You can reach Marie at her website, mariealessi.com, or join her private Facebook group, Loving Life After Loss. And I'll include those links in the description. Welcome, Marie. I'm so glad that you could join with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Linda. I was really looking forward to this.
I have been too. And I checked out your website and I watched your video and I read your story about you and Rob and about what you are doing. And I think everything about it is just beautiful and amazing. Would you be willing to share your story?
Absolutely. And thank you so much for this lovely intro. I feel humbled already just to be here. Share my story. I always struggle doing that in a nutshell because there's so much to tell, but I'll do my best to keep it short, and then you can ask me whatever you want, Linda. Yeah, I am originally from Austria. I moved to Australia in 2004, and only a short 10 months later, I met Rob. It was just one of those meant to be stories, absolute happy love story. And yeah, another 10 months later, we got married. I would have never, ever believed if somebody would have told me, oh, you're moving to the other side of the world and then you meet the man of your dreams and 10 months later you're married. I'm like, if he's Mr. Right, he'll still be Mr. Right. In 3 to 5 years, I'm not going to rush anything. And when Rob proposed, I was like, of course, there's no questions, Yeah, so we really were that couple. Everybody just like, oh my God, you and Rob, you're that dream couple. And we had our dream life, our dream wedding, our dream children. I can't leave the dream out for the children. They'll be upset if they ever listen to this. And like, where was the dream when you mentioned us? So yeah, we had two boys, Flynn and Jet, and our life was pretty cruisy and filled with lots of love and lots of beach time and family time. Rob loved the water. He was an Aquarius, so he loved diving, spearfishing, surfing, everything. And one day he went on a business trip to the other side of Australia and never came home. So that's really the nutshell version of a very intense phone call that I was told, your husband deceased in a hotel room this morning. And I was like, yeah, that's basically, yeah, the intro. I'm not really sure where you would like me to take this and how much more you would like to know from the beginning, middle, or end. So I hand this back to you, really.
Thank you. And he passed away. Was it a brain aneurysm? Was that?
Yes, it was very sudden. There was no pre-warning whatsoever. He always had regular health checks. There was nothing. I remember he had quite intense headaches before he left, but he had a really bad head cold. So nobody thought anything of it. And even in hindsight, the doctor said, look, there's nothing that could have picked that up. Not even knowing that now, there's nothing that could have prevented that. It was really incredible. Yeah.
It's actually kind of helpful to hear because then you don't have.
It was.
And how old were
what ifs? Yeah.
At that time?
Flynn was 10 and Jed was 8, so quite young.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then everything changed in one phone call.
Yeah.
Everything.
Absolutely. I still remember, I often refer to this moment like, imagine I'm showing my age here, but your favorite song playing on a record player and all of a sudden the needles scratch it all over it and it's silent. That's what it felt like. It really felt like the whole world stood still when I got this phone call because this was so unexpected. Rob was supposed to come home on Friday and that phone call happened on Tuesday. And then we flew across the country to identify his body. And we came back on the plane that he was supposed to come home on, which was really very bizarre. Our entire world had changed in those few days. Yeah, so
when your whole world turns upside down in a phone call, how do you pick up the pieces? Because that's what you are doing, is helping people pick up the pieces. So it's not just let's survive. Let's be able to carry on. It's, let's be cheerful. let's look back and be grateful for the time that we had. Let's
Yeah.
find joy in the future. And that's kind of the magic. You have a different
Mm.
approach than a lot of people do. And people have
Thank
commented on
you.
that.
Yeah. A lot, yes. It was actually, I just had goosebumps when you asked me that because it brought so much back to me. Um, Rob and I had a couple of talks about this. What if, as you do as a couple, you would have come home from work and might have heard something on the radio, and we had these chats. What if something was ever to happen to you or me? And we always said, I'd want you to take the boys and create the happiest life possible, because that's what love is. Love is not, I want you to cry for the rest of your life and fall apart. Love is, I want you to be happy no matter what. And that includes such tragedy. Then no matter what, I want you to be happy. And I would have wanted the exact same for him because that's what love is. So that's how I addressed life, literally from the first moment onwards. It was almost like something had switched on within me instantly. And I still remember that moment so vividly when I got that phone call. I just sunk to the bottom of the floor and I sat there and I felt like, as I said, the world had stood still, and then something clicked, and I kicked into what I call functioning mode. I literally just did what I felt I had to do, and obviously the first thing I had to do was I needed to share those news with the boys, and that was definitely the hardest part of the entire journey. Even looking back, even all the years after, even the weeks and months after, um, that was the hardest part, having to tell the boys, and I had no time to prepare. They were sitting downstairs in the living room. They had their Hapkido uniform on because they were doing martial arts at the time. They were ready to go to training, and then that phone call came, and I had literally those 3 to 5 seconds to prepare when I walked downstairs to the living room, and I sat with them and I shared the news. There's no sugarcoating. I literally had to say it straight out. And in those couple of seconds that I had, I expected tears, of course, no questions asked, but I didn't expect the screaming. And that really pierced through me. That screaming, them falling apart. Oh, I can't believe how many emotions that still brings back now when I talk about it. But it was really, that was really intense. So there was a lot of hugging and crying together. And then the next thing was I said, pack your things, we're going to Nano Nono. I just knew that I had to tell his parents myself. There's no way that I wanted them to hear the news over the phone. And they live about 35, 40 minutes away. So I thought, no, we're going. And we did. So I delivered the news. And then unfortunately, same thing happened again. I told his mum because his dad was in the shower. And then I heard her say it to him behind the door because it was such a thin door. And then he screamed and fell apart. And that was just so intense, and I felt so horrible for the boys to have to live through that as well. And from there onwards, like literally from the second I told them, my only worry was my boys. That was my only worry and my only focus. And that was why I found it relatively easy. And I really highlight the word relative. To put my focus on happiness and love, and how can I create a life as light and as full of love as possible for them. And that was my main focus from day dot, like literally from day dot. And it was definitely not easy the first few days, few weeks, but the more I focused on that, the easier it came to me, if that makes sense. It really, like, whatever you focus on, grows. And that was amazing watching that, and also how people responded to that.
I love that. Whatever you focus on grows. I think that's so
Mm.
important. And I want to go back just quickly to
Sure.
your conversation that you had with Rob and how you
Mm.
wanted each other to be happy. And that
Yeah.
is your way of expressing love. And I
Mm.
appreciate that so much. There are people who feel like love means that I can never be happy without you.
Yeah.
Love
Way too many
means
people.
if I have a happy day, if I ever smile again, then I am betraying this person
Yeah.
that I love,
Yeah.
that I have
Exactly.
lost,
Mm.
because that is the way that they interpret the expression of love.
Yeah.
And they mean it with all the genuine, from the depths of their heart. I want to
Mm.
express my love for this person. But I am sure that their loved one wouldn't want that kind of a
No.
response, because if they love you, they want you to be happy
Yeah,
and joyful.
absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
I just really appreciate that you were smart enough to have already had a
Mm.
conversation and to predetermined said, we want to
Yeah.
be happy. We want to be happy. So when did you recognize that what your response was special and
Mm.
unique and something that other people really needed to hear?
First of all, thank you so much for pointing that out, Linda, because I feel that, yeah, this is what society unfortunately has taught us. And I am here to prove society wrong, seriously. And it's not about being right or wrong, but it's about providing a different approach to grief. And we can all have that. So I often say, just imagine your loved one still being around. Would you want to honor them and portray the love that you have for the person by being horribly sad the entire time when you're not with them, or do you still rave about them? And I'm talking like they might be in the next room or on a business trip or somewhere else. You wouldn't run around and crying because he's not next to you. You'd be talking about them fondly and full of love. And why don't you do that when they're gone forever? Why? I understand why a lot of people would go like, well, because I never see them again. I get that. But my most beautiful way of honoring him is to talk about him with love and have this love legacy for him. So by that, I realized when people looked at me and they saw me too happy under huge quotation marks, too soon under huge quotation marks, I would get comments or sometimes hear them behind my back going like, oh, she's still in denial or she's still in shock. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not in shock. I'm not in denial. Of course, I was shocked, don't get me wrong, but I didn't get stuck there. I saw it as an initiator of what I needed to do. I'm like, this is your clue. This is your clue. That's exactly what you talked about. And this is now not theory anymore. This has become your reality. So that one change a thing. I still want to grab the boys and create the happiest life possible that I can for the three of us. And I did that, and I saw some people frown about it. Some people are really happy for me. Some people, as I said, oh, she's still in denial. And then they come with the 5 stages of grief, which is absolute has not ever been intended for people who have died. The 5 stages of grief are always intended for terminally ill people. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people
I didn't know.
talk about the stages of grief, and there's denial and there's shock and there's anger and all of that. I never felt angry. I never felt I was in denial. And it made sense when I only heard it like a year or two later that somebody said to me, Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who's the origin of that, she wrote that for terminally ill people, not for people who have passed. And that made so much sense to me. I'm like, yeah, of course, there would be the denial, there would be the bargaining, there would be anger. And it makes so much more sense, because not everybody is at peace with going. And so when I noticed that, I remember I had a nervous breakdown about a week after Rob passed. And I remember that everything just got too much for me because, there was so much that had been going on. We had to fly to the other side of the other side of the continent and come back and prepare the funeral. My mom was flying over from Austria because she was supposed to come. Her flight was already booked for the Holy Communion of our little one. And I just couldn't believe the timing, that her flights were already booked, but then she came for the funeral instead. And then about a week after, when the funeral was done on Wednesday, and then on Sunday we had the Holy Communion, both in 1 week, I was overwhelmed, and I just had too much on my plate, as you can imagine. And I had a nervous breakdown in my kitchen. I remember the boys were, bickering over brushing their teeth, and I said, guys, please, can you just please be nice to each other? And then I started yelling out to them, I just need peace and quiet, And the moment I said this sentence, it was like a key sentence. It was like a valve had opened and I couldn't close it anymore. And I still remember it so vividly because I started saying this sentence louder and louder, and then I started yelling it, and then I started screaming it. I started screaming it on top of my lungs. I just need peace and quiet. And then I just screamed. pitch tone. I just screamed and I was whacking kitchen cupboards. I completely lost it. And I still remember watching myself as if I was standing outside going like, what are you doing? Just stop it. What are you doing? I really thought I'm going to lose my mind in that moment. And I remember thinking the neighbors are either going to call the police or an ambulance in a minute if they hear that, you know. All of that was going through my mind while I watched myself falling apart and I could not stop it. And that was the trigger for me to go and see a psychologist. And I saw a psychologist for about a positive psychologist, very, very important difference, for about 4 months. And that was incredible. It was really incredible. And she asked me, and that was an absolute key moment for everything else we'll talk about. She asked me, you know, when I talked about this nervous breakdown, I said, it's just all this expectation, what people expect from me. I broke under the expectation from people. If people would have just left me to my way of grieving, I think things would have gone very differently. But I was breaking under the expectation. I could feel that it was too much for me. And she looked at me and said, so what does grief mean to you, Marie? And her calmness really just completely, it just oozed into me. And I looked at her, and to my own surprise, I said, empowerment. And that was a really unexpected response. And that's when I realized that I saw grief very differently to people around me and anyone that I've ever known about being in that situation.
Yeah, I would not have expected that word, and I'm excited to talk about
Me
it. I
neither.
want to go back just a little bit.
Sure.
Some of the things that you brought up that I absolutely love, and I'm so glad that you were willing to share, is
Mm.
that moment of breaking down. And
Yeah.
as you're talking to people and saying, there is life, there is joy after
Mm.
loss, that some
Mm.
people might think, well, then that means if I'm to do it right, like Marie did it right, then
Mm.
I'm never allowed to fall apart or I'm never allowed to
No,
be sad. And that's not what you're saying at all. It is
no.
going through that process. And you mentioned that
Yeah,
the 5 stages of
exactly.
grief doesn't
Process. Yeah.
necessarily need to happen, but there's still a
Yeah.
process of grief,
Yeah.
and that is absolutely okay. And that
Mm.
you recognized, I can't stay in this place. I feel this
Yeah.
way, but I can't stay here. And you
I
were
don't want to stay
smart
there. Yeah.
enough. I'm glad
Mm.
smart enough to go talk to someone who could help you get
Mm.
out. So just such beautiful pattern of, yes, it's okay to be sad. Yes, it's okay to work through things. Yes, it's okay to get someone to help, someone who
Yeah.
can walk you through. And then
Absolutely.
you, just your self-awareness of, what does grief mean to me?
Mm.
Empowerment. Can you
Yeah.
elaborate on that? Because I would never have come up with that word.
If you would have asked me consciously, me neither. It literally came from subconscious. And I believe the reason why that came up was because I felt two things were really predominant after Rob passed. One was strength and one was love. I felt so much strength and so much love within that I have never experienced in my entire life before. And I always say it almost felt like Rob poured all of his love and his strength into me when he passed over. That's what it felt like. Um, and I strongly believe that's exactly what happened. You know, I understand that everyone has got very different beliefs and a different faith, and I really honor that. I really, really honor that everybody comes from a very different perspective around that and different upbringing. Yet my belief is that Rob and I had a soul contract, and that was over. But it took me a while to get to that. It was not that I got that phone call. I'm like, oh, okay, cool, thanks. The soul contract is over and hang up. That's not at all how it works. It was that process that you mentioned, you know, going through my process, allowing all of the emotion in, not stopping the crying, not stopping the falling apart, but also not stopping the love and the happiness and the joy. And all of that happens because all of that is part of life. And life doesn't stop just because somebody else's life stops. And that's a big lesson here, you know. Our life still continued. And why on earth would I say, well, Rob's life has stopped, so now we need to cancel out all the happy emotions? They're not allowed in anymore. Why? It doesn't make sense. That's exactly what Rob would want for us more than anything in the world. So yeah, my biggest message in this was to not stop any of the emotion, to allow it all in, to sit with it, but also remind yourself of the choices that we have. People often say to me, what do you mean by that? I didn't choose that my husband passed. I'm like, well, on a soul level, you maybe did, but let's just put that completely aside for now because everybody's got a different faith. But even if you don't choose that, you can still choose how you respond to it. And that's where your empowerment lies. Reminding yourself of the choices you do have, how you live your life, how you respond to it, who you allow in to hold space for you and support you. And that's really important to remember that.
What a beautiful, beautiful reminder. We don't
Thank
get to
you.
choose what happens, but we do get to choose our responses. And
Yeah.
that's a power that we always have. What a lovely, lovely
Exactly.
thing. Thank you. Would you be willing to share your 7-step grief to relief program?
Oh, wow.
How do you get there?
Sure, absolutely. So I hope I remember them all. I wasn't prepared for that question, but I'm more than happy to go into that. So um, the From Grief to Relief is a healing journey that I created and refined over the years, and it's also available for free in my group, so people can always join and watch that. There are videos that come with it, but I'll give you the nutshell version. So the first step for me was to separate who you have lost from what you have lost. So in other terms, it's like often people just look at it as a package. I've lost Rob, and with that, my feeling of loved, being loved, feeling safe, and all of that has gone. Well, not quite. So I need to look at what is it that I miss the most. So that's how it helps me to separate who I've lost from what I've lost. And for me, there were examples like feeling safe, like feeling protected. Rob was my absolute protector. He was my knight in shining armor. I always felt safe when he was around, and that was gone. So I really noticed that quite strongly. I used to be really scared in the dark, and I never was with Rob. So that was a huge difference for me. Also, like, he used to love cooking for us. He was my own personal master chef. I always said I was very, very blessed that he was really good at cooking. When you look at the 5 love languages from Dr. Gary Chapman, absolute fantastic. I really recommend for everyone to do that. It explains a lot about dynamics, not just between couples, but also within the family. And my top 2 were physical touch and quality time. So that physical touch means I'm a hugger. I just need hugs. I just need somebody. I need to feel it physically. You can ask all my friends. I'm a hugger. I just love hugging people. And that was gone. So these are just some of the examples to separate, what I have lost with Rob's passing. And the second step is to then see how can you recreate that. And I always make a huge point about this is not about replacing someone or something in your life. It is about recreating it or creating it in your life in different ways. It's not ever going to replace it. Hugging a friend is not ever going to replace hugging Rob. However, it will fill your love tank, how Dr. Gary Chapman refers to it. It will make you feel more loved. I did things like, one of the first things I did was I pushed my bed into the corner. I felt more cradled in and safer rather than having, space on either side. I wanted to sleep in the corner and be cradled in. I used to go around and check that the front and the back door is locked, although we live in a really safe neighborhood. But, little things like that. What can you do to feel safer, to feel more love, to feel the hugs, to all these things, whatever that is to you? Just go through that and see how you can create that for your life, because it will fill that up a little bit more. It will not completely replace it at all. And but it's about not leaving this gaping hole there that a lot of people talk about. It leaves this hole behind, and you can fill that with love and with hugs and with feeling safe. And no, it will not replace that person at all. But it's important to look after that and to take on the responsibility and step back into empowerment by doing these things. The third step for me is something, I try to make this really short because there's a long story attached to that, but I call it the Hole in the Hill experience. And that comes from an experience when Rob passed. Then I wrote a book about it. Then I traveled around the world with the boys for 2 months, and then we came home. So I'm talking about a time frame of 9 months. And after 9 months, the boys went back to school, and all of a sudden I found myself in a living room with no plans. I had everything planned for these 9 months, every step of the way, from the funeral to releasing the book to traveling around the world, coming back. And all of a sudden I sat there without any plan, and I didn't realize. And I felt that there was this gaping hole opening up to my right that I would say people would probably describe as depression. And then there was this little hill of new memories that I had created after Rob's passing that I felt I had no strength left to climb up. But I also knew I didn't want to slide down into that hole. So that's why I call it a hole in the hill experience, because I realized I can stay in the middle and simply observe. I don't need to do anything. I don't want to move to the right just so I wouldn't slip into this hole, because I was worried that I might not get back out. And I can't climb on this little hill because I don't have any strength left. So that's why I call it my hole in the hill experience, because I described it in a lot more detail. And this is where I learned to just sit and observe. When times are really tough and you feel you've got nothing left to act, just sit and observe. It's okay. And be mindful of what you're thinking, what your thought process is. That's the fourth step. Thought patterns and language. Be mindful of how you talk, not just to others, but predominantly to yourself. You know, are you having thoughts like, it's too hard, I can't do this, I don't want to get out of bed? Or can you change that language into just one step at a time, Marie? Just one little step, just the next minute. Just take one breath. I'm not asking you to, you know, gallopal off into the wild and do like a 3-hour yoga session. I'm saying just take one breath. You know, that can make such a huge difference in terms of bringing you back into the now. Then we talk about guilt, secondary gain, and forgiveness. This is a really big one. Like guilt, you know, is an emotion that a lot of people struggle with. And we talk about that at the beginning, so I'm not going to go into too much detail again. But also the secondary gain. If you do stay stuck in grief or in guilt or in pain or in suffering, what do you get out of it? And people go like, I don't get anything out of it. I don't like it. But coaches refer to that as a secondary gain, because people do get something out of it. Sometimes it's the simple fact, not having to do anything, not taking on the responsibility, feeling safer in the suffering than having to bring up the strength to do something about it. Do you know what I mean? So there's always a secondary gain, even if it's that simple. And then the forgiveness part, very often with somebody passing, there are some sort of needs for forgiveness coming up. And again, I'm just going to shortcut it and leave that there for now, because there's so much to talk about. Then I hope I'm not forgetting something now. There's 2 more steps. I've actually just written them down yesterday. I know that one is the role reversal, but that's the final step. I think I'm missing one. It might come back to me. But the one thing that I really love about this whole exercise is, and that's why I leave that to the very last, is the step that I call the role reversal. And this is, so many people say just write a letter to your loved one, but that's not what it's about. I call it the letter. The letter is so important because I get people to do it from a different perspective. I ask them to step into the perspective of the loved one who has passed, and then look at themselves and write a letter from your loved one to you. What is it that you feel your loved one would want to say to you right now? And often it starts like something like, Linda, I am so proud of you with what you have done since I've gone, you know. And this is really one of the most healing exercises that people do in this. And it's just really incredible looking at, what comes out of it. I can cheat and quickly look up the extra step if you want to.
Oh yeah, we're all open to. This is an open book, Vince Marie.
Perfect. Because I know I've got it open in the background, because I literally just wrote about that in my second book. And oh yeah, it's hidden gifts. Oh, how could I have forgotten that? One of my favorites.
What's hidden?
The sixth step is the hidden gifts, and I refer to them as hidden gifts in adversity. And that is when you really allow yourself to look at what have you actually received as gift since your loved one's passing? And for me, that was an enormous strength, an enormous positivity, and all the love that I felt. And I felt so looked after. And then, of course, what came out of it, sharing our story in a book, being ranked in the top 100, and then creating this global movement. There are so many gifts in that. And it is not just for us, but it's like a ripple effect that we are creating in the world right now. And just being here with you is one of the many gifts that I have received, being able to share my message and being offered various platforms to do so. So thank you for that gift, Linda. This is really amazing.
This
I'm
is
glad I looked it up.
This is a win-win gift to be
Yeah,
able to
thank you.
share your story and to be able to hear and to learn from you. And I thank you for digging up these hidden gifts and
Yeah,
paying it forward. And you and I are on opposite sides of the planet. So you
yeah,
have
it's true.
gone full circle and beyond.
Mm,
And I just really, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you've done because
thank
your
you.
example gives other people permission to follow suit and to be
Yeah,
able to recognize that there's a new pattern, a better pattern than just suffering or enduring
yeah,
or coping, but instead it is let's heal and let's move
mm,
forward and
yeah.
grow. And you have done just such amazing things. So thank you for what you've done and for who you have
Thank
become.
you. Thank you so much. I feel so seen and honored. Thank you.
Oh, and thanks for visiting with me today. You're amazing.
Oh, it is my absolute pleasure. And I want to say one last thing quickly, if that's okay.
Of
It
course.
is also that, people often feel like they don't know how to do the healing, and they focus on how can I do the healing. And I would say, don't focus on the healing, focus on the love, on the happiness, and everything you want in life. The healing is what happens along the way, and if you're open to it and allow that, then that's amazing. That's exactly what's going to happen.
What a beautiful clarification.
Thank you.
Focus on the love, and that's what
Mm,
makes the difference. Okay,
yeah.
I feel enlightened. Thank you.
Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to share a quote from the Persian poet Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi. He said, "Grief can be the garden of compassion. If you keep your heart open through everything, your pain can become your greatest ally in your life's search for love and wisdom." If you have experienced loss, I invite you to allow your grief to become a garden of compassion and allow happiness and love back into your life. See you next time on Linda's Corner. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Linda's Corner, please share and subscribe to help us reach new listeners. I also invite you to check out my nonprofit, Hope for Healing, at the website hopeforhealingfoundation.org for free ebooks, free audiobooks, and other free resources to help increase happiness, build confidence and self-esteem, strengthen relationships, manage stress, and calm feelings of depression and anxiety. I also invite you to grab a copy of one of my books, like Crushed, A Journey Through Depression, or Amazon bestseller, You Got This, an action plan to calm fear, anxiety, worry, and stress. See you next time on Linda's Corner.